Welcome to the Dixiecryptid channel. This is Marathon 131, I think. Pretty sure it is. Got 5 stories in this video. Think you're going to like them all. Also, one of them is done by my co-conspirator over at the What If It's True podcast, Neoma Finn. She's one of my favorite narrators, and I love her voice. I love her narration style. She's happily agreed to do a story for me on Dixiecryptid. If you guys want to hear more from her, go ahead and subscribe or go listen to my What If It's True podcast out in the Podcatcher network. It's really good. Okay, let's get moving. All right, here we go. Here's an email from Wayne, and this is crazy. My name is Wayne, and this is about an encounter with a Bigfoot. My father and I were on a hunting trip in the foothills of North Carolina. We had set out corn to bait deer in the area the week before. We decided to camp out in the area and go hunting the following morning. At 4 o'clock in the morning, I was awoken by the sound of some rustling around of some leaves and the snapping of twigs on the ground. I unzipped the tent just enough to look outside to see what it was. 50 feet away, I saw something that at first looked like a bear eating a deer. The deer was still moving, or twitching as if it had just been killed. Within a second, a horrible odor hit me, smelling like something in decay or rotting. It was terrible. It must have heard me move because it quickly stood up on 2 feet. It wasn't a bear, and I realized what I was seeing. I fell back into the tent and lifted my rifle in the direction of the beast. Then I heard heavy footfalls of this thing charging the tent, and within a second we were both lifted into the air like we were in a sack. The Bigfoot had picked the tent up and was dragging us along the ground. I worked the rifle around and got off a few shots. This made the creature release its grip on the tent, and we fell to the ground. Through the holes I shot through the tent fabric, I saw a blinding white light for just a second, and then everything went deathly quiet. My father breathing was all I could hear. My father asked in a panicked state what was going on, but it took me a while to compose myself to tell him what had happened. We both got out of the tent with our firearms, but the creature was gone. The only thing that remained was the mutilated deer. We packed our gear and we left at daylight. And on our way out, thinking the event was over, we saw a line of black SUVs parked along the road. A couple of men stepped out and waved us down, and we stopped. They came to the window and asked several questions about why we were there, and then they asked if we had seen anything unusual while camping. Well, I've heard and read about these things, and I kept my mouth shut. I told the man we hadn't seen anything. Apparently, he believed my lie, and we drove home. I've never shared this story with the public, but I think it's now is the right time, seeing more and more people are coming forward and deciding to share their experiences. Well, that's a short, compact, scary, terrifying story. Holy crap. I mean, he sees a Bigfoot, it comes over, picks the tent up, dragging. Where's it taking you? Where was it dragging you to in the tent? And then you got off a couple of shots. Thank God you had a firearm. It lets you go, and then there's this white light, which brings in what? I don't know. I don't know what that means. But it leads me to believe like this thing was, I don't know, interdimensional. Whoop! This bright light happens, and it disappears. Man, what a scary story. I really appreciate you sending it, Wayne. That's a good one. That's a real good one. Thank you, man. I have had 500 offers from companies to be an affiliate sponsor or to be directly paid by them to advertise their product, and I've turned every single one of them down. And I'll tell you why. I want to be real careful about the kind of stuff that I recommend to you guys, but I've run across a company and I've taken on an affiliate sponsor. And the reason I'm doing it is, number one, because I bought their product, I paid for it, it was shipped to me, and I use it, and it is absolutely wonderful. I love it. The name of the company is Yeti Bars. It's a soap company, and I'm a freak for soap. I love my showers in the morning. I love to smell good when I get out of the shower all day long, to have that soap scent on me. I don't use any of that snake oil cologne or anything. I just use soap. I like soap. I feel so clean. It's great for my skin. I have dry skin, and this is really good for my skin. I still have to moisturize, y'all. I still have to moisturize. But it's a lot better on my skin than the soap you buy at the big box for $1 for 10 bars. It lasts longer per bar, and Yeti Bars has a competitively priced great product. Now look, I buy this soap. I've been buying custom soap like this for 2 years. It's owned by two brothers. They're located in New Mexico in the Four Corners area. It's two young guys working hard with great morals. They come from a tough background, and they are working their butts off trying to build a company, and I want to help them. The name of the company is Yeti Bars. You can find them at yetibars.net. I'm going to have a link in the description below. As an affiliate to their company, I get a little tiny piece of every sale that you buy if it comes off of this ad. For the next 2 months, I'm going to give you that commission back. So with an already competitively priced product, I'm going to give you back my commission on it. And the way to claim that is at checkout, enter the promo code DC10, and you'll get a 10% discount off of that purchase. I got up this morning and I bathed with the Yeti Hippie #1. Oh man, I love the way this soap smells. I bought 6 bars to begin with. I'm going to order some more next week. They've got several different kinds of soap you can look at. I know you're going to love it. Yetibars.net. Yetibars.net. That's YETIBARS.net. There it is on your screen. You can also find them on Facebook. You can watch them cutting soap, making soap. And they also do some really nice things for the homeless people in their area, and there's some videos of that. I just fell in love with these guys when I saw what they were doing. Yetibars.net. Get your discount by using the discount code DC10. Have some fun with it. Smell good all day. That's what I asked them when I first called them. I said, what's your mission? He goes, man, we want to make people smell good. We want them to feel clean and smell good. And I thought, okay, I can get behind that. Yetibars.net. Go check them out. Thanks, guys.
This Bigfoot story comes from a lady who asked to remain anonymous, and she says it's true. In the spring of 1978, I was grateful to be invited to Altoona, Georgia with my baby girl for a holiday weekend. It was a nice break from a marriage I was beginning to realize was made in hell. Baby girl was cutting teeth and as such was fussy that weekend. So my brother-in-law decided we would need our very own tent, set up at the extreme right end of the camping spot. We unloaded and put things into place, cooked, and enjoyed the view. This was Friday night, so folks wouldn't be piling in until the morning. Also, my brother-in-law was familiar with the place and had reserved a pretty secluded spot for us. With supper came all the fun stories people tell around campfires, along with the promises of the great fishing and playing in the water we could expect in the morning. Eventually it was time for bed, so baby girl and I went to our little tent and settled in. She was still being pretty fussy, but I finally got her to sleep about dark 30. A storm blew up on us, and I was awake in an instant. So was the fussy girl. The wind blew, lightning flashed, and rain pounded our tent. After about 15 minutes, the worst of the storm passed, and it was just raining, but now baby girl was awake and fussy. Again. I was still breastfeeding, so I tried that first. Then I tried her juice bottle and finally her pacifier. Nothing worked. She just kept fussing and crying. At this point, I started to notice that baby girl's cries came with an echo. She would let loose with a wail, and then it would echo back. I tried lulling her to sleep with a song, and right away I picked up on the fact that that didn't echo. Now I was beginning to hear rustling in the bushes behind us. I could hear the sound of sticks breaking and limbs. By now I had ruled out echoes, even though it sounded just like her. At one point, she even raised up and looked at me as if to say, "What's that?" The rustling got closer, and the echo started coming from directly behind our tent. I began to see shadows cast on the tent from the lights of the nearby bathrooms. I was petrified. My brother-in-law unzipped his tent and asked if we were okay. I said yes, but he said my baby's cries are annoying. I said she's teething. He said, "What?" I repeated. He couldn't hear me, and after the third attempt, he simply laughed, zipped his tent closed again, and went back to bed. The conversation must have been enough to scare off whatever was out there, because the echo stopped, and I didn't hear any more rustling in the bushes. Eventually, I got baby girl to settle down, and I got a couple of hours of sleep that night. Saturday night was a repeat of Friday night minus the storm. Baby girl would cry out, and then I would hear an echo of her cry. The rustling in the bushes and the snapping of the limbs repeated as well. By Sunday morning, I was exhausted and on edge. I got the nerve to bring it up, hoping someone else had heard something, but I just got laughed at and had to endure a barrage of jokes. Sunday night was the most frightening. Baby girl cried out and was echoed. Then the rustling of bushes and breaking of sticks and branches came. This was the worst night for baby girl's teething as well. She was in a lot of pain and I couldn't keep her quiet, but there was no way I was going to walk around with her outside that tent. As I sat there, rocking and soothing my baby daughter, I looked up and saw a shadow on the back of the tent. The baby screamed and the echo repeated exactly like her cry. The shadow just moved side to side, playing the echo game. I didn't smell anything and I couldn't tell how tall it was. It was just very stout. The night dragged on for hours, with me sitting there holding my baby close and not knowing what to do. I almost peed myself when the shadow touched the tent and started mumbling. Baby girl was still crying, so it was impossible to tell what it was saying or if it was saying anything intelligible. It sounded something like mo mo dit dit. It lasted until baby girl finally fell asleep. I dozed off, sitting up holding her in my arms. Monday morning finally arrived. With it came the gorgeous views of the lake, the awesome crisp freshness of the last morning meal, and the camaraderie of my breakfast companions before breaking down and packing up to go home. When my brother-in-law started breaking down my tent, he asked me, "Have you been walking around back here?" "No," I said. He started checking around and told me, "Well, something's been smashing the undergrowth and walking around back here." He looked at me, his face pale under his sunburn, and his eyes were as wide as saucers. I said, "Tell me the truth. It wasn't you just trying to scare me, was it?" He denied it, and my sister confirmed that it couldn't have been him. He'd had too much to drink each night to be out playing pranks. All the way home, my brother-in-law kept glancing over at me. I think he finally figured out that I wasn't joking with them. Years later, I learned that Bigfoot are known to make baby crying sounds in the woods. I could have fainted when I learned that.
This story is from Ron. In 1970, I was fishing in the phosphate pits around the Fort Meade Mulberry area. I was running trot lines for catfish and turtles. I always carried my .22 rifle and a 12-gauge shotgun because I would shoot coots for bait. I did a lot of small game hunting and I was a really good shooter. One evening, about 2 hours before sunset, I was looking for coots for bait. Driving along a gravel-top road, I came up to a small pond with a single cypress tree in the middle. The pond was about 40 feet from the road and almost perfectly round and nearly 50 yards in diameter. And on the far side, I saw a single coot walking at the edge of the water. I took a shot and I killed it. I walked around to the far side of the pond, and before I got to the coot, I saw a line of tracks coming out of the pond. They were human-looking tracks, but they were huge. I could tell by the impressions that the tracks were headed out of the pond. I didn't see any tracks going into the pond on my way around it, and I continued to walk around the pond to see where it had entered. Coming all the way back around, I saw nothing, and I wondered how it got in the pond. I searched 50 feet in front of my car and then 50 feet behind my car, and I still saw nothing. I looked to the other side of the road up and down. It was all undisturbed brush. I went back to the tracks and I looked at them and I realized that they were not only huge, but they were quite far apart. The sand along the bank was wet and hard, and the tracks were twice as deep as my tracks. As I tried to step from one to the next, I had to stretch so far to the next one that I could not take another step without falling. The tracks went up a slight hill and leveled out and went in almost a straight line towards the pine and palmetto forest. This thing had left tracks almost 14 to 15 inches deep in the sand, and I was beginning to feel like it had to be a Bigfoot. I reached the edge of the pines and I saw a trail through the palmettos that had been completely smashed down. Thinking hard about whether I should follow the tracks, curiosity got the best of me and I started walking slowly into the trees. A few feet in, I felt the hairs on my neck start to tingle. I stopped and looked around, and off to my left I saw two huge eyes 8 inches apart looking right into my eyes. They were kind of yellowish gold with a very thin black line all the way around the dark black center. I was not able to move, but I didn't feel any fear, nor did I feel threatened. I was almost at peace. I don't know how long I stood there looking at it. All I saw were its eyes. Apparently, it was crouching down behind the palmettos. I was looking into the eyes and I remembered I had my .22 rifle, and I thought I would definitely not have enough firepower, and if I tried to shoot it, it would just make it mad. I started walking backwards, almost tripping over the palmettos. When I reached the sand, I ran back to the car. I got in my car and I locked the doors, and I sat there trying to make sense of what just happened. Suddenly, I felt another calm come over me. I had the same feeling while I looked into the creature's eyes. I felt a change had happened to me, and my take on life was different somehow. I was looking at life in general in a whole new way. It made me a better person in a strange way. From that day on, I have had a way with all animals. I've read a lot of stories about these beings, most of which are not out to harm people, but I've heard that some of them are aggressive. Thankfully, the one I saw was only as curious as I was. Oh, Ron, that's a good story. I really like these good stories where people have a good experience with these things, because it just puts a whole different air on the thing, or a whole different mood over the thing. And that's cool. You had an encounter with a strange creature and it kind of changed the way you look at wildlife and animals. I like this story, buddy. I'm really glad you sent it. Thanks, Ron. I got an email from Kathy, and this is what she writes. Hello, my name is Kathy and I live in Charleston, West Virginia. I too have an encounter with a creature I could not explain. It was here in the mountains of West Virginia back in 1980 when I was 15 years old. Back then, I would go ginseng hunting with my dad and my grandpa out on my grandfather's homestead near the Clay and Nichols County line. The place was called Wilson Ridge near the mining town of Wyden, West Virginia. On the day in question, we started early, but it was already hot and muggy. My dad had ventured off the ridge, and my grandfather and I went in the opposite direction, on a trailhead going downhill towards a creek, where we would be in the shade. Papa had trained me to be a good woodsman, and I had been to the area we were in many times. So when he decided to venture out further on the mountaintop, he felt comfortable instructing me to go on down towards the water. I'd been walking along this path for about 30 minutes looking for ginseng when I came across some golden thread. It was also in season, so I stopped to pick some. I was down on my knees digging out the roots when I heard someone or something walking in the woods above me. I looked up, but I couldn't see anyone through the scrub brush. I called out, "Hey, who's up there?" The walking stopped, but there was no response. I listened for what was probably just a minute, but it felt like an hour. The woods were so quiet, not even a bird was chirping. I finally shrugged it off and got back to digging. I carried a little transistor radio with me, so I pulled it out of my bag and I turned it on as I finished clearing out that patch, and then I moved to another one. As I worked, I sang along with the country music that cracked and popped out of the speaker of the little radio. I had turned it up loud, so I guess that's why I didn't hear anything walking up on me. All of a sudden, the hair began to stand up on the back of my neck, and I was overwhelmed by the feeling of being watched. No one was supposed to be out there on that property except me, my dad, and Pawpaw. "That's not funny, Dad," I yelled, and from somewhere to my right, a 5-pound rock flew out of the underbrush and landed about 2 feet from me. That got my attention. I stood straight up and I whistled really loud for Dad or Pawpaw to hear me. As an answer, a growling scream erupted from the underbrush from where the rock had been thrown. I burst into action, running down the hill as fast as I could. I left everything behind me, my tools, my bag of golden thread and ginseng, even my radio. I didn't stop until I got down to the creek where my dad had parked the truck. I reached under the back tire where a key was hidden and kept in a magnetic box. I grabbed it and I got inside and I locked the doors as I did. I started tapping out SOS on the truck's horn until I heard 3 shots from my dad's .22 pistol. We didn't have cell phones back then, so we had other more creative ways of communicating. A few minutes later, Dad came flying down the ridge, having fully understood that his little girl was either in trouble or injured. He found me crying and screaming and making very little sense. It took him a good half hour to calm me down enough to get the story out of me, and by then Pawpaw had joined us. Once I was able to make it clear what had happened, Pawpaw jumped into the driver's seat and drove us out of there without another word. We had crossed the river and were a half mile from home, which put us a good 10 miles from whatever this thing was, when Grandpa finally spoke and he said, "I guess the old man of the mountain doesn't want us back up there. I guess we won't be going back." But my dad did go back the very next day. He went to get my tools, my bag, and my radio. He found them in the place where we'd parked the truck the day before. My radio was still turned on and playing John Denver's Country Roads Take Me Home, of all things. I'm not afraid to go back in the woods, but I do have a respect for all the sentient beings living there. After that encounter, my dad and Pawpaw taught me to look for signs of the old mountain people, as they call them. I know now to recognize their territory and steer clear of it. Knowledge I've since passed on to my 2 sons. They're both good, strong mountain men who also respect the law of the mountains. Thank you for your time and God bless you, signed Kathy. Oh, wow, that was a great story. Let's see, that was in 1980. That's the year I graduated high school, so Kathy and I are about the same age. That's a scary story, but it's good that you guys kind of learned what was going on and you know what to do and you know to look for signs and you know to get out when it's time to get out. Kathy, that was so good. Thank you, ma'am. An email from Daryl. I was not a believer in Bigfoot until August of 1969. I was out picking huckleberries with my wife, my brother, and 2 of his friends when I changed my mind. We were picking berries and minding our own business when we heard gunfire and bullets started flying just over our heads. My wife said, "I think someone wants us to move." My brother and one of his friends agreed. "It's not worth dying over," they said, so we all got in our vehicles and we went up the road. While my brother and his friends stayed at their truck and made themselves something to eat, my wife and I decided to go check out the area for huckleberries. We found a great spot and we started picking. There was a big old stump that looked kind of like a bear not far from me, so I thought I'd have some fun with my wife, and I said, "Hey, look at that bear." Then it got up, all 8 feet of it. It stretched for a minute, and then it started walking towards us. I realized it wasn't a bear, it was a Bigfoot. "It's not a bear," I yelled at my wife as I tore off down the trail. "It's a Bigfoot, and it's coming right at us." My wife looked up as I flew past her and took one look. Oh, you ran right past your wife, brother. You made a big mistake. My wife looked up as I flew past her, took one look at what I was running from, and took off right behind me. We ran all the way back to the truck where my brother and his friends were still eating. We told them what we had seen, but all they did was laugh at us. We didn't care. We got in our car and drove home. If my brother and his friends wanted to stay and picnic with Bigfoot, that was their problem. That happened at Swan Lake Mountain in Montana. My wife and I thought it would be our one and only Bigfoot encounter, but we were wrong. It was only 2 weeks later when we decided to go camping at Lake Mary Ronan that we had our second. We got to the campground only to find it was full, so we decided to go up past a Christian camp we knew of, and we found a great spot there. Our 6-year-old and 3.5-month-old sons were with us, and so was our dog Toby. Our 6-year-old was really into riding his bike, so we brought it too. Whenever our son was on his bike, our dog loved running beside him. We thought it was pretty strange when he didn't want to this time. I told him to go on, boy, and gestured for him to follow my son, but he just looked up at me. I said, go on, go with your boy. And again, I gestured. This time, reluctantly, the dog followed my son, but it was pretty obvious that he didn't like it. Meanwhile, my wife and I went about setting up camp. We were situated with a big meadow to our left, the lake in front of us, and the woods were behind us. We decided to go to the woods and collect some firewood. We were following a well-worn trail when my wife noticed a pine tree that had been snapped off about 10 feet up from the ground. Maybe the wind blew it off, I said. But then we saw the treetop in an 8-foot by 4-foot wide hole with the pine cones and needles. It looked like something was making a soft bed. We could see big footprints all around it, maybe 15 to 16 inches long. I wear a size 13, and these were bigger and a lot deeper than my footprints. My wife remembered our recent encounter at Swan Lake Mountain, and she wanted to leave. I tried to talk her into staying, but she was having none of it. She couldn't shake the memory of what we saw before. To make matters worse, our dog was scared and shaking and wouldn't come out from under the pickup. Finally, I said, okay, let's eat, and then we can pack up and go home. After we ate, my wife was using our stroller to help get things back into the vehicle, and I was packing the tent. She asked me if I could help her for a minute, and I had just said, yeah, just a second, when a powerful bad odor overtook the campsite. Do you smell that? I asked my wife. Yes, she said, scrunching up her nose at the smell. I started packing the tent a little faster while she put the boys in the truck. At that moment, an ear-piercing, body-shaking, screaming roar broke through the air, sending chills all down our bodies. I grabbed the tent, no longer concerned with packing it, ran over to the truck, and then threw it in the back. My wife picked up that stroller full of stuff like it was nothing and slung it into the back too. We piled into the truck with our dog and got the heck out of there, with branches and rocks and nuts and all kind of things being thrown at our vehicle all the way. It would be another 25 years before we would go camping again. Before I sign off here, let me remind you to go to YetiBars.net and get you some really good smelling soap so you smell good. That's what they want. They want you to smell good. YetiBars.net. Use the discount code DC10 and get 10% off. Go buy some soap from those guys. They'll appreciate it. All right, we'll see you guys on the next video. Thank you.